I started my journey actually being a computer engineer, and very quickly learned that I am not talented enough to be able to compete with the pool that I had to compete with. So I shifted, started my career actually in high tech and aerospace, and then spent about 13, 14 years in Orange County here at one of the largest medical device companies. And about 8 years ago, the founders of CathWorks and the very first group that had invested in it reached out about this crazy idea of trying to do what we do. What you talked about, basically, I'm sure everybody knows because we hear this all the time. The number one cause of death in the world is cardiovascular related death. It's about 18 million deaths each year globally, about 1 million in the US, and 48% of it is what Vijay talked about. And sadly, out of that 48%, 2 out of 5 patients, 40% go misdiagnosed or undiagnosed, even though we have very good evidence and actually technologies that can detect that, because those technologies come with a cost. They are invasive, That's why physicians don't want to do it. So the concept of CathWorks is, can we do better than that? Actually, it started just like that. A physician inside a cath lab not being able to cross the invasive catheter for 45 minutes and basically looked at the angiogram and just guessed what they had to do, walked out and said, we got to do better than this. And it just happened that, somebody was crazy enough to want to go and do that.
So one of the things that Ramin had shared with me is that the risk of actually dissecting an artery when you put this pressure wire across the heart is 1.5%?
1.7%.
1. Okay. Who's? But here's the problem. If that happens, the risk of not making it is 50%. And so it's a very serious problem, and clearly we want better diagnostic information. But with that, Ramin, why don't you tell us a little bit about your primary product? What does it offer your patients that is, we sort of alluded to that already, but.
So it's basically a platform, It's a supercomputer, and really the product is a software application. It combines AI and computational science, fancy word for algorithm. It takes the routine angiogram, that's the x-ray that they take from your heart, and it uses AI to build a 3D model of your heart. So without requiring that invasive step, which is putting a catheter inside your heart to determine whether the blockage is large enough that you should intervene or not, non-invasively gives a physician the beautiful 3D view of your heart. The catheter will only tell you if you have a blockage in that place that you put the tip of catheter. Our technology allows you to see the entire heart. Actually, 1/3 of the time, you're not looking at the right place, because when you try to look at a 3D problem through 2D lenses, they refer to it as ocular angiography. You make a mistake. But then it goes further. It allows you to, if you want to intervene virtually, imagining putting a stent inside the artery and recalculating what happens. Does that remove the problem? And gives you all the information that you need on the sizing of a stent, putting a right stent, so you don't put too many stents or too little stents. And then when you're done, after you've done the intervention, gives you an ability to do a confirmation that you indeed solved the problem. There's nothing worse than a patient that goes in a cath lab, waking up and say, oh, I still have a chest pain, and then you got to go back in there. So it gives you kind of that end-to-end. It does it non-invasively and slightly prettier than, just looking at an X-ray. I don't know about you guys, but I have 2 kids, and one of them injured themselves, and we went, to an orthopedic, person. I do this for a living, so he's looking at X-rays, like, as you can see, and my wife and I are like, we can't see, but we trust that it is there,
That's funny and not funny, isn't it? So we talked about what this is offering, sort of. You're a frontier firm. It's offering more than other companies offer. What's been the impact on the industry? Because clearly, you're threatening some aspects of the industry, or disrupting, because this is a better solution. How do you see what's happening in the industry? What is, we don't have to get into the specifics of the companies, but what's the state of the art? What is your product doing?
Yeah, I mean, we've entered a space that 3 out of the big 4 in cardiovascular space have a pretty dominant space. This is $1 billion market that we entered into. There's a video, if you Google it, you will find where, about now 10 years ago, when this concept was presented, somebody who is a past president of the largest society, in the U.S., told the presenter, it's just crazy, So I think the industry has taken one of the two approaches to this. Half has said it is insane, it will never happen, whether it's because you are trying to be defensive, and usually if you're in a larger strategics, you don't make moves to just defend your business, even though you should. So this is eating very quickly. I mean, I'm very happy we're growing really fast, but because it tackles the problems that it was out there, and I think this is what you were just trying to say, to just try to apply this to the broader thing. It is here, whether we like it or not. It's just a matter of time, and I'm sure you'll get into it and tell you that we didn't get to it because, I'm sure the people at Cobalt that you showed are very, smart people. They're predicting future. We had our back against the wall, so AI saved us, actually. But it is here, and you see, sadly, large players who are unwilling to do that. We are really experiencing a little bit of BlackBerry, and a smartphone in our space with a large player who basically has decided that BlackBerry is really good, and time might be, running up.
Yeah, one of the things that I've learned over the years is the timing of when you actually implement innovation is really important. One of my friends actually says, everything is born, it grows, matures, and then it declines and dies. And the time in a technology that is when it's moving so fast is you can't invest when you're already in decline. You have to invest when you can, because once you need to invest, that's not going to work. And I think somebody else said earlier, like when you're particularly successful, it's very hard to sort of make these disruptive changes. But that is the point I want to make with this conference, frankly, which is I think if you pay attention to what the industry is working on right now, it is just mind-boggling. I've been in this business for a very long time through I don't know how many technology life cycles, but I have never seen anything like this. And we haven't seen anything yet. But let's get back to CathWorks, which is, I chose not to say this in my talk, but you've been acquired by Medtronic. Congratulations, first of all. And sort of why did they buy you, and why did you sell?
I think, so we are in a publicly disclosed deal as of a couple of years ago where CathWorks will become part of Medtronic. We've kept the two companies separate for the time being to be able to move really fast, because we are now your world best funded startup. We get to basically move very quickly, and I get to not worry about what all the startup CEOs do. I don't need to raise money, and I don't have to worry about exits. But the reasoning behind it, I think, is that looking at the change in the space, the Medtronic view was that, if you have technologies, you can always become the second player, third player, fourth player, or you make a bet on something that can become the first of its kind, changing an entire category. And the funny thing is that I was in Paris just a couple of months ago at one of the largest European conferences, and I asked a colleague of mine to just count the number of presentations of somebody trying to do something similar to what we do, and there are 47 of them, And I was like, well, this is what you're just saying, there's a time, and I'm sure there are smart people there, but Medtronic wanted to be the first one to do that. From our perspective, and our mission is to partner with physicians to transform how cardiovascular disease is diagnosed and treated. It's a cause close to my heart. My mother has heart disease, so it's more than just, a slogan. And the best way to get this out there was to partner with somebody that has existing channels. Because even if you had the unlimited amount of money, you will not have the unlimited amount of time to do that. So we are in a deal with them, and we get to co-promote the product right now in US, Europe, and Japan, and about to expand outside of that. In the meantime, we get to innovate and, and add more clinical evidence.
And as I was preparing, I sort of searched for CathWorks on YouTube, and there's any number of videos with you announcing sort of more partnerships with hospitals. So kudos for that. But let's go back to the beginning, shall we? And so when you took over as CEO of CathWorks, what was the state of the solution then? And let's go to the first consumerization, because that journey is very, very interesting.
Yeah, and this part, because usually we look at the other side of it, and it looks really good. When you look at it from where you were, it didn't look as pretty. We actually went through a pivotal study back in 2017. In 2018, we had an FDA-cleared product and did not have AI in it. So We were ready to, and it was a very high quality, clinical evidence when they got FDA approval. So when you presented it, it was very, very promising. And we did what you do in medtech, which is we ran a limited launch. Actually, we did it here in beautiful state of California to stay close to home, and it was just as bad as it gets, because basically the experience was it would take, you had to do what AI does manually. Basically, an end user had to do, which would take you about maybe 15, 16 minutes in a case to do that. Now, to be fair, that is still 4 or 5 minutes faster than putting a catheter in, and you still didn't have any of the risks. But we got into basically universally getting it's a really cool concept. No way I'm going to do that in my lab. And part of it was because physicians rather have something in their hand, and spend the same amount of time than waiting for a machine to do that. So the concept was really cool. This is why I have a strong reaction about the concept of a plan than an actual plan. But it was not ready. It was not ready, to commercialize it. We heard that from the customer.
And the general version of the problem is all of us face a challenge with AI adoption. Even within our companies, not even trying to sell it to somebody else. So this is, there's a lot of people who are scared of the technology, don't trust what it predicts, and so on. So then you went back to the drawing board.
Yeah. Because we had no other choice.
But yeah, you had run out of money at this point, right? You were
68 days.
68 days.
I don't know how many
it's funny
CEOs are here, but it's not pretty when you sit there and you start. Once you reach the point that you can count back, you're not in a good place.
But and Ramin never forgets 68. It's not 67. It's not 69. Every time we've talked, it's 68.
Because I went back home and I told my wife, she's like, so when you left and you said it's going to be really big, did you think about this?
So you had 68 days before you got kicked out of the house?
Yes. Yeah, well, I mean, and our problem was a little even more difficult. You're in one of the best real estate end of the world here in Orange County, so people who invest in that can relate to it. We had just raised $30 million, about a year and a half ago before we hit this, because the product was about to get FDA cleared. You go commercialize it, and $30 million was just to commercialize it. It's a lot of money to raise $30 million. And it's the analogy that I use is that we took a $30 million because we had a great land, and we said we're going to build a beautiful house. And we had to go back to the investor and said the $30 million will be used to fix the land so we can get a zoning permit to build a house, which they realized quickly you're going to come back and ask for another $30 million. Yeah, so that's where it was. We had to go back to the drawing board, figure out, is there something left that we can do?
And then where did the idea of AI come from? So this is how many years ago now?
This was in 2019, right before pandemic hit.
Okay, so talk about how you discovered AI as your savior.
So we took a very practical look at, is the foundation of the concept sound? And we felt strongly it was. And going back and listening to the feedback that we were receiving, there were two things that were standing out. It was this idea of user variability, and time. And we were brainstorming, trying to figure out, what have people done to solve for time? And then in a brainstorming session, somebody said, when they created Uber, it was really solving for time. The issue of waiting for cabs is a problem. So we started kind of doing a research of what are the best ways of solving for time. And you talked about GPUs. One of the things that this thing has is the machine has one of the most powerful standalone GPUs. So somebody in our team was like, maybe we can just have the machine do a lot of the work, that the user does.
Yep.
That was, and in a very, actually not a straightforward way, when you move your way back, that's the very definition of machine learning. Deep machine learning is actually working your way back to get the machine to do the work. That's how we got to where we got.
But then talk about the implementation of the AI, because that's the story in itself.
Yeah, so if you're in healthcare, we're very special. We don't want anybody to come in, and nobody ever leaves. And we tried to do that, and up until that point, our software development was truly your waterfall software development. Even though we were a software company, we really quickly realized that this skill set, another slide you had, of what we need to do doesn't necessarily exist in medtech. And as I started looking into it, looked like in the consumer device, because of what we were doing, the computer vision part, there's a lot of advancement that were made in those who are doing basically phones that have camera. So we went and actually hired the person who led the Samsung basically Galaxy, camera in Israel, and he brought him in, which, in the beginning he wasn't really well welcomed by our team because he was an outsider who had no idea. And thank God we did that because that's what changed the whole landscape.
So that's fascinating because so he's a visualization expert, basically.
It is, that's what it is. He didn't know anything. He told him what cath lab is, he couldn't find it in a hospital.
Okay, we'll leave that one there. But he knew how to do visualization.
Better than anybody else that we had,
That's fantastic. And then you hired a team around it?
So yeah, we built a team around him. We had to completely change the skill sets that we had from your traditional software developer to algorithm engineers who understand AI and neural networks and what goes with that. And we basically gradually shifted the team, built this AI capability, had to go back to the regulators and talk to how you basically get this clear and approved. We got it through, we took about 2 years basically to do this thing. Whatever we could basically do with the small amount of money that you could get your hand on. Once we had it, the bet that we met was we're going to go back to those same basically customers who turned us down. And it was a big bet that if they said it's ready, and the only way to know it is if they start buying it, then we have solved the problem. If not, we don't have a product, and as luck had it,
they did, I guess.
They did, yes.
So that's fantastic. Talk to us a little bit about. So I assume the system keeps learning because that's one of the benefits of deep learning and machine learning more broadly is these systems get better.
Yeah.
So do you think about it in terms of the lead you already have over your competition, how you can enhance the lead, and I don't know, is it getting a better algorithm, or is it also moving into related areas? Or
I think there are two different things. You touched on one of them when you showed your Mercedes-Benz, slide where you need to be humble enough to partner with others who are good at what they do, so you're not the solution to everything else. But there's also a data play, and I think that's where we have an advantage. I'm sure most people in the room know you need about 10x of the number of parameters you're solving for in a neural network to be able to do initial training. So an angiogram has about 256 metadata that comes with it. Our original data set was actually larger than that, about 5,000 basically angios to train. We sit at the largest, at the world's largest, set of angiogram now as a result of, having been able to commercialize this, and we've helped 50,000 patients with this in the last 2 years as a result of partnering with Medtronic. I think that's the advantage. Getting your hands on millions of data sets is not as easy, and we have that, and that makes you better as you move forward.
Yeah, and this is why when I was urging companies to move faster, because the lead that you acquire from the data that you have, it's sort of what Google does with search. Once you have the data and the users, you just keep learning faster than everybody else, and it makes it harder for them to catch up. So how do you protect this IP? What is your core IP? Is the machine learning algorithm, the insights you generate from it? How do you protect it?
Up until we did this, and we were the first one, and we were really good. Actually, our IP partner is here in Orange County. Kenobi, does our IP. We had a very strong IP all on computer vision, and then we had to change the way we think about it. And it was a little bit of struggle, because I don't know if anybody has done this. Trying to do IP around AI is a little more tricky because you would have to stay super abstract, which makes it harder for you to protect.
Because you don't want to give away.
Yeah, because you don't want to get away. Or you need to get more specific, but then the minute you do that, you better be on that game ahead of everybody else. So you have to play this 3-4 moves out. And we've chosen to do both. There are elements where we've stayed very broad, but we've changed it. We've added families of patents that we did not have before. And if I had to think about where we're spending our basically energy and resources, more than half now goes into the AI part.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So let's see. And then from a talent perspective, because you've sort of moved from, a medtech firm, which you sort of are, obviously not you sort of are, you are. But this is a very sort of algorithmic, machine learning heavy stuff. So you remember me talking about Cobalt, where I said they have 1/3 geoscientists, 1/3 software, 1/3 machine learning. How many people do you have who do this for you?
Yeah, we have a very large group of engineers for what we are as a startup. Even though we are in this deal, we still a startup. A company of over 130 people, half of them are engineers, and now out of the engineers, more than half of them, one way or another, are tied to this. And you need different kind of a skill set. The vertical of an algorithm engineer then raises the talent need that, hey, you need to have like a biomedical engineer who can translate the real world to them. Otherwise, we'll live in abstract. So we've added functions that didn't exist before. And in fact, some of what we recruit for, the hardest thing is we have to spend time thinking, what do we call it? Because it's not out there, and you need to make it attractive enough for somebody to leave Google, is hire somebody from Google, but our version of it is going to be different than their version of it. So how do you paint the picture that you're going to have a long, thriving career here?
No, this is the nuts and bolts of it, which is this is one of the things that I think is really important to highlight, which is, number one, you alluded earlier, there was some resistance to the first machine learning people. And you hear a lot of, I don't know how many people I know who've actually switched to companies that say they want this machine learning person or a data scientist, and then they don't want to listen to what they have to say after they hire them. So I think but the second thing you alluded to, which is the employee mix is just completely going to change. Because and we're only talking about the early stages of AI. If you just forecast a few years out, it's going to be very, very different in terms of what companies look. We were talking last night with the deans about how much we have to change as to what we train people for.
No, it's a big mind shift. To make it very real, our head of clinical and regulatory decided to leave when I made the change, because he said, this is not how you do medtech, med device. So she left, and she's like, this is not going to work, and there's a reason that's how you don't do it. She left, and I think 183 days later, we announced that Medtronic is buying us for upfront $585 million, and I really want to resist making the phone calls hey. So now, but that's what it is, and it impacts all of us, because these are not clear decisions. But I go back to what you said. The change is happening, So the question is that and the thing that you said about Peter Drucker, that stays with me. I'm going to use that. This idea, if you have in turbulence, you're trying to use the past logics. If we use the past logics, I would work somewhere else right now.